Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make this love and heart design on the front of a cabochon setting. And this is what it looks like. So you have your word love there with wire writing and then all your hearts put together. And this is all made with one length of wire, so I'm going to show you how to do this. So this is the design I'm going to show you. And what I've already done is a tutorial on how to make the actual setting for the cabochon. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below. But if you want to learn how to make this design for it, then keep watching. So these are the 3 gauges of wire that I'm going to use to make this design on the cabochon, and they're all regular round wire. The first one here is the thickest, and this is a 0.8mm. This is the one I'm going to use to write the word love with. The one in the middle here is a 0.6mm. This one I'm using to make the hat because it gives a little bit more detail. And the last one here is a 0.25. This one I'm just going to use to attach my designs to the frame. So let's get it together and let's get started. So what I have here now is a bit of paper that I also used to make my original cabochon wrapping, and then I also need a pencil. So what I'm going to do is take the setting that I've already made, and I've prepared the back as well. You might want to do this before you finish the back off, but what we need to do then is basically draw out this space where we can have a design on. So I'm going to put the front facing down just like this, and then just take my pencil and draw along the inside, because this is just to give you an idea of the size, because then you can sit and draw your design out before you make it and then refer back to it. And you also know exactly what size you have to play with here. So you just want to draw around the inside there, because obviously that will be different than the outside circumference of your actual full cabochon. So like that. So now we know I have this area to work with for my design. So then what I did was use this space to then draw my design. So I knew I wanted the word love and then some hearts as well. So what I did is I drew the word love at the bottom here, but going across at a bit of an angle, more towards one side. And then to balance it out, I wanted the hearts kind of on the opposite side, more towards a bit of an angle as well. So this is how I wanted it to look roughly. So this gives me a good idea of what I then need to do with my wire. So what I want to start out making is the word love there, and for this what I'm using is a length of a 0.8mm wire, and we don't really need much for this because it's just a short word, so about 20 centimeters or so will be sufficient. So what I'm going to start out with using is a pair of round nose pliers here, and then I'm going to start at this end of the word, so start with the L. So if you can imagine, you can almost kind of trace as you go. You can keep comparing back to this as well to get it roughly looking the same. So I'm going to start with placing my pliers on my wire. Leave a bit of a tail there because I'm not going to do the very first loop just there until the end, because that can then help adjust compared to what your actual final piece is going to be. Because this design that I've done is basically just more of a guide. So what I'm going to do is place them in a little bit, then take my long end here around my pliers, around the back of them, and then underneath this tail. So underneath there, and come back down. And then you just want to decide how large you want this loop to be. So this is a little bit too big still. So just keep adjusting as you go. And have this come straight down with that short tail coming out the other way. So you can keep referring back to the sketch that you've made. It looks a bit more right now. And then what we need to do is come down the L to make the little loop down here. So I just want to make sure that I'm getting kind of my spacing correct. So what you can always do is also put it down on the paper and then put your pliers in place while it's still on the paper, like that, because then you know exactly where on the wire you need to place your pliers to get the next loop, just like this. And then take the long tail again, go back around. This time I'm going around the top with my wire here. You can always keep repositioning your pliers as you go to make it easier to work with, to come back out this way. Slowly starting to see the L there. And just find however you feel comfortable working with it. There we go. Refer back to it. And then you can also always, I find that actually this is a little bit, it's gotten a bit too tall. So I just want this loop to go a little bit more upwards, so you can always just roll it as well, like that, and that's much better. So now we need to go on to the last part of the L to then go into the O, because all the letters are connected. Get your angles right. Just like that. And now to make the O, we need to then also decide how large we need that loop to be. And then again, to make the O, you can easily keep using your round nose pliers. Just decide where on your pliers you need to place your wire to get the right size loop. What I do like to do though, is use my 6-step bell making pliers, where you have each step there is a specific size. I just like to use that for certain loops so I know exactly what size they get. So I'm going to place those a little bit along, so we have the space in there, so we have the actual L before we start making the O. Place that so the size loop I want is on top of the wire. I want the second smallest here. Just bring my long tail around that and then towards the bottom again, on top of the rest of the word. So around the front there, bring it all the way around and have a look at it. See what it looks like. I can see that O is a little bit too far away, so I'm going to do the same, place it back in my pliers and then roll it backwards a bit until I'm happy with how it sits. That's what you got to keep looking at as well when you do wire writing, the proportions of the whole word and the letters compared to each other. So something like this is a bit better. So then I need to move on to make the V. So I'll bring this back upwards again, making sure it's going upwards. Not all the way to the top of the O, but kind of out to one side here. Because then what I'm going to do is take some pliers. These are just some flat nose pliers or chain nose pliers. And then I want to just, the very end here is where my V is going to start. So I'm going to place my pliers in there. And then bend. So make sure you're using a very tip of your pliers. So ideally if you have some chain nose pliers for this, bend the tail back, because now we need an angle rather than a curve or a circle. So like that. And we can sharpen it up. And make sure that the wire comes down properly at the correct angle. Refer back to it. So a little bit more. So as you can see, the design that we've made doesn't necessarily end up being precisely the same, but it's just more of a guideline. And then you work out as well as you go how it looks and what's the better way to do it. So like this, that's your one half of the V basically. So we need to come down to the point of the V, decide where we want that to be, place your pliers in, and then bend it back up again to get that angle. So there we basically have the V. And then we just keep adjusting it as well as we go. So if you need to make the angle a bit tighter, you do that. Just so it looks nice and even when you look at it, as if you would almost write the word. So now to move on to the E, we need the top again on the other side, so the top of that V. So make sure you place your pliers where you want it to be, and always remember, what I like to do is place my pliers and then bend my wire against my pliers. What you have to remember is when you do that, the bend isn't going to be exactly where the pliers end. You're going to have about a millimetre or so after that. So you just need to account for that. So place them and bend it back at an angle there, so it comes a little bit back down. Not all the way towards the bottom, but kind of towards the middle of where the E is going to start. So something like this. So then to make the E, I'm going to take my round nose pliers again, because that very circle on the E I want to be quite small. So place, go a little bit further down than where the angle is. Place your pliers in, bend your long tail around there, back around the top, and then come down around the front of your word again. Like that. So it's pointing downwards. You can see that's the one part of the E. And again, like I said, you can always adjust this. You can roll it up if you need to, or down, depending on your spacing from the previous letter. And then I like to keep my pliers in there while I'm then shaping the bottom as well. And I just do this by hand, making sure that you get a nice curve here going on the bottom, pretty much level with the rest of the word as well, so it all looks in proportion. There's something a bit like this. And then that is basically the word. So what I have now is this wire, making sure that that's coming a bit upwards towards the side of the E there, so the outside. And then now what I want to do is basically refer this back to my actual setting, because we just need to make sure that it fits nicely and that it looks how we want it to look. So I just take my word there and then place it down and see if I'm happy with how it's going to sit. So this is kind of how the word is going to sit going across. So what I need to do now is finish off both ends there with the loops that I'm going to make. So to do that, we need to cut the ends down, because as you can see we didn't use much wire for this. So I get my flush cutters and then cut the end down, and I always leave more than what I know I'm going to need, because I'd rather have too much and then keep kind of trimming it off until I have just the right size. So I'm cutting that down so I have a couple of centimeters left. Same on the other side, just like that. And then I'm going to get my round nose pliers again and start making a circle going inwards here. So if I start from the word L, so from the beginning of the word, now with this I want this loop to be going kind of downwards. So I start towards the end of my wire there, and I don't want the loop to be too large, so I just place my pliers where equals the size that I want my loop to be. Start curling it inwards until the end of my wire meets up with itself, basically. Something like this. Have a look at it. And I can probably tell this is going to be too long, but that's what I mean. I'd rather have that and then gradually trim it down than have it end up being too short and have to start over. So I'm just going to do the same with the other one, curl it down as well. This one I also want to be going downwards. And these loops we're also going to use to attach to the frame. So we're both finishing off the wire nicely, and it adds to the design, but it's also practical. So like this. So again, I've done that. I'm just going to refer back and see how much too big they are or too long. So I put the bottom of my words, or my word there, my letters, down towards the frame, and I can see the loops on the sides that I just made, they're both sticking out a bit. So I do need to adjust them. So I just keep going back in, start with one loop, cut off a bit of the actual loop, the very tip of it, go in with my pliers again and recurl it. Just like that, and that's what you want to keep doing. Refer back, see how it is now. Still a little bit too big. As you can see, the loop is sticking out. All of the ends, all the frame here needs to be on the inside of the frame and not kind of sticking out. At least not for this design. You can always do that if you want to. So I just need to trim off a little bit more. Like that. Curl it down. And then I think we should be almost there now. Place it in. And that's a lot more like it. So the L looks pretty good now. What we have left to do is finish off the other side. Again, that's too long. I'm going to trim off some of the end. Go in and recurl it down. And I could also see that it's kind of a bit too wide, so I'm going to push it in a bit. But it's all these adjustments that you do now, once you kind of made your word and you have your frame. You can see how it's going to sit compared to each other. So that's very close now. Just a tiny bit more. So just like this. Curl it down. Making sure the loops here are nice and closed. Place it in. See how it looks. And then when you're happy with it, you have your word ready to attach to your frame. So now to make the hearts up here, and for this I'm going to use a length of a 0.6mm wire, and this is about 30 centimeters or so. Again, we don't need too much, we just need to make sure we have enough to work with. And also, like I said before, the design that you make on here is more just a guide really, because once you make it in white it might turn out a little bit differently. For instance, on here I drew 4 hats, but in the piece that I've already made I ended up actually making 5, because once I made it, the 4, this was the last one I added onto it, these 4 were the ones I made. I kind of felt it looked a bit odd and something was missing, so I ended up adding in an extra hat. So it's just a guideline, you can always change it as you go, depending how you feel as well. Also when you then compare it to your frame, how it looks, and look at the proportions as well. So I started up here at the top with a small hat and then worked my way all the way around all the hats with one length of wire here. So what I'm going to do first is create that little hat to begin with. And again I'm just going to leave a little bit of a tail. Not that we really need it for anything, but it's just, I'd rather have it there so we can hold on to it, or it might be helpful later on. So what I'm going to do first is start where the very cleft is of the hat. Make one side first, and again I'm using my bail making pliers for a lot of these hats to get consistent loops, because obviously every hat you need kind of 2 loops, one on each side. I want to make sure that I try and make them as consistent as possible. So for the first one here I'm just using my second smallest one, placing that on the bottom of the wire, and then bending the long tail of my wire here around that, so back around the bottom to come back down. So they're both basically going down side by side like that, and that's the one kind of side of my first hat there. So again I can keep referring back to it, because then what I need to do now is take the very bottom point and make that. So I'm going to place this, when you're happy with your loop, then you want to take, again I'm going to use some chain nose pliers, and then basically to create that very tip I'm going to put this down like I said before, and then place my pliers on my wire exactly where I want that to be, because that way it's easier to find out exactly where you need to make that bend. So place your pliers there on the wire and bend your wire against your pliers upwards at an angle there to come up to create the other side of the hat. So it looks like this. And the tail here can get a little bit in the way, but just if you push it out of shape, just push it back in again. So it looks something like this. Make sure you keep your wires straight. If you get a few kinks or bends while you're making this, just straighten out before you move on as well. So now to make the other side, I'm going to place the same step on my bail making pliers there in on the long tail here, have it come back around that to create the other half of that hat, so something a bit like this. So it's basically the completed hat, but obviously we need to continue on now to be able to make the next one. So to do that we need to basically trace around again, following the exact same shape that we already made. So you just, before you do that, want to make sure everything is sat in the right place, so you like the way your hat looks, so just adjust it if you need to. And then I'm going to get my chain nose pliers again. So we need to basically get that cleft put in there. Now we need to make an actual angle to make it. So I'm going to place my pliers below this time, and this time I can't bend against my pliers, because if I place them up here I'm going to make this part straight again. So I need to go below where the cleft is going to be. And remember, when you bend wire like this against your pliers, you're always going to have about 1 millimeter or so before the actual bend happens. So make sure you account for that. I'm going to put my pliers in there and bend my wire upwards to come back up the other way there. And it might go a little bit out of shape as you're doing this. It's not a problem, we can put it back into shape again once we put the angle in there. The important thing is to get the angle in place to begin with. So like this, as you can see, this one a little bit out of shape, but we just put that back into shape again. And bring this down. So there we have the cleft of the hat. Make sure your wires, because now you started putting this long tail on top of the other one. That's what we're going to do, trace around that. Make sure they're right on top of each other, so you kind of ideally can't see the one below sticking out beneath the other one. So because I used my bail making pliers, I know I can easily go in and use them again. So the second smallest was the one I used to make this part. So I just place them back in the exact place where that loop is, and then take the tail and follow it back around the pliers there, because that way you get basically your pliers your wires are lying in the exact same place and end up right on top of each other, just like that. So now that we've completed this hat, we need to move on to start making the largest one there. And then again, I'm going to bring out my 6-step bell making pliers here, choose which size I want that hat to be. So I'm going to use the third largest one for this. And then what I'm going to do is, again, always working with the long end here of the tail, place my pliers in. You can't get this side all the way into the hat, but just get it as close as possible. And just place it where you want it to be. So that smaller section is actually going through your hat until you can't go any further. And then this long tail, I'm going to start bending around that size that I want it to be. Coming downwards, so a bit like this, just so you get the first curve in place there. You can always straighten it out, because again this is the first curve, but then I need to come straight down to create the side of the hat then. So it's going to lie like this. So just straighten it out if you need to. And then we need to come down and make the very point again. So like I said, you can always put it back on your sketch and then use that, leave it on there, and then use that to place your pliers exactly where you want that bend to be. So like that, and then take it up and bend your wire against your pliers to get that angle in there. So just like that. So I then need to make the other side of the hat over here, so the curve on that side. Again, use the same one that you used over here to get the same size loop, and place in where you think that curve needs to be. Bend your wire around, come back down, basically on the other side parallel to the line that you just made to begin with. So now we can look at it, and I can see this is a little bit too far up compared to the other side, so it's going to be out of proportion. And that's where again you can just place in your pliers, and then to keep the shape and the curve, you just gently roll it down and then keep checking until you feel it's in the right place and it's going to be equal to the other side. So again, to then help you get the proportions right as well, put it back down, see if it looks nice compared to your sketch. And then to make that cleft part again, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, put them just before I want that bend to be. So roughly like this. And also look compared to your hat itself. So the cleft now that we're making, we kind of need to look at the proportions compared to the point at the bottom. And if you think that's going to match, bend your wire up against your pliers to go back upwards again to complete that other side of the hat. And then we just need to finish off that side to completely finish off the full hat here. So again, because this is the first curve that we made, I take my pliers again using that very same size loop, put that through the hat, because so I know both sides of the hat are going to be exactly the same size, and then just take this on top of the other hat there, bend it back across and back down the other side. So again, this wire that we just made, we know for definite it's going to run right on top of the other one. And you can always adjust it a bit if it's not completely lined correctly. So if you just need to kind of tighten it up a little bit. So just like this. Now it lies pretty perfectly on top of the other wire on this side, because we have two wires on top of each other just on this section here. So that is now the complete hat of the large one. So we need to move on to the next one down here. So for this one, I just moved up a little bit to the other side again. So I get my chain nose pliers, and then the point that we already made, I put my pliers right where that is, right up against it, because that way I ensure that the bend we're going to make now ends up in the exact same place. So just like this. Make sure your wires are straight on top of each other, and then once you've got that, bend it upwards against your pliers to get that angle in, and make sure it lies right next to the other one, so when we look from the front, again we just have the shape perfectly on top of the one we already made. So to then start the next one, I want the next small hat to come out kind of a little bit up the side here. So again, I'm going to take the chain nose pliers just to get a very small little bend there. So make sure you use a very tip of your chain nose pliers. Place on the other side of the angle that we made. Bend your wire back against it. So basically come out from the hat. Because that's what we want now. To then start creating the next one. So it looks something like this. Still making sure that everything else stays in place. If it moves a little bit out of place, rather just go back and fix it while you're here. So this wire that we just bent down is now already forming part of that next hat. So to make the point of that, because what we're going to be doing is coming down from one side, we haven't made the bend yet or the curve, coming down to the point first. So I'll place it against my sketch, put my pliers in where I want the point to be just before it, pick it up and then bend my wire against my pliers. A nice angle, about 90 degrees. Obviously it all depends as well how you want your hat to look, or all your hats for that matter. Come back up like this, and like I said, keep checking back to the other hats that you've already made to make sure you're not accidentally kind of pushing them out of shape. So like that. So now up on this side we need to go up to make the first curve on the hat on this side. So again, I'm then going to take my 6-step bell making pliers. As you can see, I keep swapping between my pliers depending what it is I'm doing, what's going to fit best. And in this one I want the hat just to be a little bit smaller than the other small one we did. So I'm going to use the very smallest step on this one. So go up to the point where you want that curve to be. Place your pliers and bend your wire to come back down parallel to the line that you just made. So something roughly like this. And then if it seems a little bit like it's going to be out of proportion, again just roll it down a little bit at a time until you're just happy with how it looks. Something a bit like this. So that's now the one half of it, so we need to make the cleft again to come over and make the other loop on this side. So for that, taking my chain nose pliers, placing them where I want that bend to be, looking at the point just to try and get the proportions right, then bending my wire up to come up at this angle, get ready to make the curve there on the other side by using the same step again on my bell making pliers that I used on the other side of the hat. Place that in right after that bend where the cleft is, and bend this back around, and again come all the way down the side so it goes parallel with the wire that's lying underneath it when you look at it from the top. So that ends up lying like this, and we can't see that we have two wires lying on top of each other except when we look from the side. Now what I also recommend that you do as you're making these hats is that once you've got a few done like this, you refer back to the frame that you already made. So place it up where you want it to lie and just see if it fits nicely, because we want certain parts of those hats to be able to attach comfortably to the frame where we still make sure the hats keep their shape, so we don't want to kind of have to stretch them out of shape. So far this is looking pretty good. You have a point there, there and there, so one point on each of the hats by now. So I just want to make sure that when I do the last one or two, however many you want to do, that I also have something down here to attach with. So with the next one, we need to start out with the next hat first, so get the wire in place to make the next hat. So I'm going to take chain nose pliers again, and then I want to basically get this wire down to this side a little bit. So almost at the very tip of that hat that we just finished, place your pliers around both of those wires that are lying on top of each other. Make sure everything is sitting correctly, and then bend this backwards. Go against the plier there to get a nice angle, because in this one, this wire is coming out from that hat to get ready to be able to make the next one. You can just sharpen up that angle a little bit, because we need to go straight into making a tiny little bit of the curve on the one side and then coming straight down to the cleft. So still using the very tip of your chain nose, that angle that I just made, so this is the long tail we have left. I'm going to place my pliers right on that side, all the way up against that angle till it can't go any further. And make sure you use the very tip because this is just a little tiny space we want to make, and bend this upwards a little bit. Because then this little angle that I've just made is basically going to be the cleft of the hat. Take him out, see how it looks. And then also, you can always go in, readjust things while you're making them. Adjust your angles, adjust your curves as you go. Just to make sure everything sits the way you want it to sit. And everything looks in proportion. So something like this. So now we need to make the first full loop here on the other side. And for this again, I'm going to use the smallest loop, the smallest step there on my pliers. Just place them in. Just bear in mind now we have a bit of wire in the way there because the other side is larger. But just get as far in as you can. Bend that back around to come back down. And then I can already see that this side, that curve that we just made is too far up, but that's because I couldn't get my pliers all the way down. But I've got the curve in place, so it's easier now to then put them back in, the pliers, and then do the roll again. So roll it downwards. So we keep that nice curve, we're just changing the positioning of it. So a bit like this is getting better. Moving all the way down there. Making sure this goes straight down the side again. So that looks more like something now. The one half of that hat, nicely in proportion. And then to make the very point again, get your chain nose pliers, look at the cleft to make sure you get the proportions right. Place your pliers where you want that point to be. And then just bend your wire against it. Take it out, have a look. Just like that. And then make sure that this side as well is straight, coming up the other side of the hat. And your angle is just nice. And then again, take your bail making or round nose pliers, whatever you're using. And then to make the loop on this side, using the same step there on the pliers, place them in, bring the wire around. And again, I'm still going around the top. I kind of tend to do that every time just purely because if you look at the other places, you can see where we bent the wire from the previous hat. If you then, the next time you go around, go on top of that, it kind of makes it look like there isn't a crossover there. It makes it look like each hat is individual. So that's why I like to do that. But it's completely up to you. Make sure that this goes straight down to then be able to go back and form the cleft on this layer of wire that we're doing now. Take your chain nose pliers, put them back in, and then once we're doing the second go around like the other times, you can use the curves and the bends that you've already got there for a guide as where to put your pliers. So just put them in the exact same space, bring that up, take the round or bail making again, and now here I can only get my pliers to sit on the outside, so I just have to gently guide this wire around until it's kind of, I can put them at the top here. Something like this. And then take it out and look and see it's been a little bit distorted now, but that's why just check as you go, because then you have the chance to go back in and correct it while we're still there. And then redo it. Just like that. And there we have the fourth hat. And you can see, because we went above with the wire, this now looks like it's separate as well. So again, now that I have this, before I move on, so I know that I'm heading in the right direction, I just want to check against my frame again. Just bring it out, place your hats where you want them to sit. And so far so good. I still have those three on top that fits nicely. This one is hanging out more in the middle, but that's why I need to make another one down here to then attach that one to the frame as well. So I've just got enough space for that. And this is also going to be quite a small hat because we only have that little space left. So I'm going to come back up the other side of this same hat that we're already working on to start the hat from there. So place your pliers on that point, going up against the bend that you already made, Bend your wire against it. And we're up the other side here, and then we're ready now to move on to make the next hat. And then I'm going to go straight in with my pliers. Again, I'm going to use the very smallest. Obviously if you're using round nose pliers, just work towards the tip rather than the large part of them. Place it a little bit further down than where the curve is on that previous hat we just made. So starting a little bit further down, and then bend this around. So I'm grabbing it from the front now because that's where my wire is placed. You won't be able to get in there from the back. So like this. Just double check how you want it to sit. So what angle you want that hat to sit at as well, because we need to know where we need to put the cleft. And make sure you refer back as well in the middle of making this hat as we're doing it to that frame, just to make sure that this last one, because I know this is going to be my last one, we don't end up making it too big or too small or something, because we need the edge of it to be able to come out and meet with the frame just like the others are doing. So place it, and I can see that I've got pretty much just perfect space to make the other half there with that size on my bail making pliers. So just to make the cleft first, again like the other times, place your pliers just before you want the bend, and then bend your wire against it, coming up at almost pretty much a 90-degree angle, depending how you want your hat to look again. It's obviously many different styles of hats. So like that. Need to make the other side. Bail making pliers with the same loop. Bring it down so you get the side of the hat down towards the tip. And before I make it, I just want to check again, because then this is the outside that I've just made that's going to be against the frame. So if that's correct, then that means I can finish off the hat to something like this. I can do that actually just adjusting a little bit, I can see. So I'm just going to bring this in. Seems like the cleft has moved out a little bit. Like that. All the time as you're doing this, making sure to keep an eye on the previous hats that you've done, just to make sure that they're not moving out of shape. Like that. We have the outside of the hat fitting with the frame nicely so we can attach it. So, to finish off this hat, when you're happy with how it's going to sit, you need to make the point first of all. And again, do it like the other times in proportion to the cleft to come back up. And this time, because this is the very last one we're making, I want the wire, the long end here, to actually come underneath instead of on top, because we're going to have an end once we cut the wire off that I want to make sure that I can hide. And I'm doing that underneath the hats, same as the very beginning, that's also underneath. So like this, you can see it's coming up to meet with the first half of the hat that we already made. Adjust it until you feel it's nicely proportioned, just like that. And then I'm going to use my pliers here and use the same step again, because we just need to come around the other side. I might have to do it from the back because that's where the wire is placed now. Grab hold of it, bring it down and around to replicate that loop. So again, we're making two steps with two layers of wire there, but now we're just coming behind instead. So just keep doing this until your wire's positioned just on top of each other, like that, coming straight down towards the cleft again. There we go. And that's basically all the hat's done now. Just double check one last time that it's going to fit in your frame here. Now, because we've made this both with the word and with the hats here, there is a tiny bit of adjustment in it as when you need to attach it. But obviously you don't want to, especially the hats here, you don't want to do too much having to bend and stretch it. So make sure it's got a nice fit, and then we just have a little bit left of adjustment that we can do when we attach it. So that looks pretty good to me. Now the last thing left to do with these hats is simply to get rid of the ends. So I'm going to the back now, and then I want to get up my wire cutters. I like using flush cutters. You get a nice clean cut, And then up here, that was the very beginning, so I have my short tail. This is coming straight down from the cleft, so what I want to do is basically cut it off right by the cleft where that ends. So the very end I'm going to have on my wire ends just before that cleft comes. Just make sure you only cut the one wire and not both of them. Need to get a different angle here. So like this, just before that cleft, so the end of the wire is hidden underneath the actual hat, the shape of the hat. Like that, you can see, we've gotten rid of that. Same with the other one. I always use my flush side against the end of my piece. And just finish it off the exact same place, just against the cleft, just before you hit it. So the end is hidden right behind there. And then that's how you finish off the wires, because normally you don't want to just cut off your ends like that and leave them, but because we get the frame out, we have the cabochon here, it's going to be inside the frame, and then this is going to lie there. We can finish off the wires like this because the ends are hidden underneath this design that we've done. So they're not sticking out on the outside and not going to catch or scratch on anything. So that's why we can finish off the wires like that and have it completely seamless. So now we have both our hats ready here, and then also the word that we made, love. Both of them are ready, so all that's left to do now is attach these two to the frame. So then to attach it, this is where I'm going to use my 0.25mm wire. It's really fine, so it's going to blend in a lot more, be a lot less seamless that you've actually attached anything. But then I'm going to start with one of them here, and then take my frame, without the cabochon yet, because we need to just put this in first. And then basically you just want to start attaching this. So first off, just have a look, see where you want it to sit. So I want the word to sit about there. So that gives me an idea where I need to attach my wire first of all. So I'm going to start attaching it to my frame. So right through there, I know that's where I want the first loop on that L to be that's going to attach. So just put that through, and I've just put it through. You have little gaps there in between your weave on that frame that I showed you how to do in that other tutorial. And just go in between just the very, you want to only wrap around the very top base wire here on the frame. So what I'm going to do is wrap around that one about 3 times. Like that, just first of all to basically attach it before we then add in the actual word. So I just always like to leave a bit of a tail there to keep hold of while we're working with it. Make sure when you're wrapping this that every time you do a wrap here that they lie right next to each other instead of crossing over like mine just did. So when you tighten it, they lie right next to each other basically. So I'm going to wrap it around here 3 times. And basically on that weave that I did around the frame, you have kind of points here on the upper side. So I'm wrapping in between those points where I have space basically. So like that, now I've done it 3 times. So this is nicely attached now to the frame. So what I need to do is incorporate my word into it now. And the first wrap you're going to do is the fiddliest one, because obviously you're only attaching through one yet. Once you've done another attachment further down, it gets a lot more secure and easy to work with. So I'm coming from inside the frame and up and out. So I want my word to lie like this. So I just want to go down through this first loop to basically make a bit of a figure of 8 weave around the two to attach it with. It's going to sit just like this. So you just first of all need to just hold it in place here while you're attaching it. And then wrap around 2 or 3 times the word or the loop here. That's going to be plenty to secure it, because we're not going to just have the one attachment here. We have multiple, so it's going to be strong enough. Going to sit there, wrap around again. So I'm just going to do another one. So basically just do whatever you feel is necessary, however many wraps you need to do until you feel it's secure. Like that. And then what you'll find when you attach the other, we need to attach this end as well back to the frame, because that's what's going to really secure the word in place. Those points you'll find is what I like to do is basically with the other end where I'm going to attach it is go to the very next one. So basically skip over one of the points and then start attaching on the other side of that, because you don't really have that much space left on the previous one to wrap around. So just do the same here, wrap around about 3 times I like to do as a minimum. So I've now wrapped around 3 times with this long end as well. So this part is nicely secure. Obviously it moves, but that's only until we do the next one. So when I'm happy with this, I just need to finish off the tails basically. So I start with one, go in, and as if I was going to do another wrap, make sure my wire is going around the base wire there, cut it off very close, and then always just take your chain nose pliers where that very end is, squeeze it down, and then I like to roll it in the same direction that the wire is wrapping around the base wire, because that really tucks it in there, and kind of you can sometimes make it go in between the base wires, so it's really going to get tucked away. There's no chance of it scratching or catching on anything. So if you can, either finish them off towards the inside or in between the base wires there. Same with this one. Cut it down, and then I make sure, take my chain nose pliers, go in and squeeze that and follow it around. Just like that. And then that's completely attached now, that first loop. So we need to continue doing this with all the points that's going to be attached to the frame. And then once you've done that, your love will be in place. And then it's the exact same technique. What you might need to do is, depending, you might want to try it with a cabochon. You might need to just gently bend it outwards a little bit, give it a little bit of a curve because it's lying across the cabochon there. Or just place it in and then just press it against without obviously distorting the shape. So you want to attach the word like that, do the exact same thing with your hats. Just obviously go through your hats instead of little loops that you made. So you want to attach all your decoration all the way around the frame just like this. So I've now finished attaching both my love and all my hats as well to the front of the frame, and then I've placed the cabochon in there and then also finished off the back. Now I do show in the other tutorial that I have how to make the frame, how to do this. So if you also want to finish off the back in this way, I show that in that one. So this is then how it ends up looking. So quite a nice and elegant and simple design with your hats and your love around your cabochon, and then that cabochon forms a really nice background to that design. So that's how you make this piece. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make a wrap loop chain and also how to have minimum wastage possible when you make them. And these are just 2 examples that I've got here. So I have this one, it's not a normal one, I've just added more than 1 bead in there, and this is using 0.4mm wire. And then this one is a more embellished one. So if you can see on the beads, I've added a bit of wire embellishment across them. So I'm going to show you how to do both of them. And these ones I've just used